Hello there, everybody. Welcome back to Star Wars Lads. We've got for you today our reaction and review of The Bad Batch Season 3, Episode 8. Fennec Shand appeared, Hunter and Wrecker go on a little mission, Crosshair and Omega do a little soul searching. It was a decent episode. We enjoyed it. Let us know what you thought in the comments or I guess the chat right now. We will get to it as soon as we give our thoughts here in our little review that we're about to bring out here. So we're going to run down our thoughts on everything that happened in this episode. You guys let us know in the chat. We will go and answer it here in about 10 minutes or so. Hopefully you all enjoyed it as well. All right. Make sure you like the video if you haven't. If you're watching on replay, join us every week, every Wednesday night, 7 p.m. Pacific time. We review the latest Bad Batch episodes. So if you want to join us for episode 9 next week, you can do so Wednesday night next Wednesday. Make sure you join us then. Subscribe if you're new as well, because we're going to be covering the entirety of the Bad Batch here throughout the rest of the season. And then the Acolyte trailer dropped yesterday, and we'll be covering all of the Acolytes. So if you're interested in hearing our thoughts on that, please subscribe and join us every single week. All right. Let's get into the review here. So, as I mentioned at the beginning of the stream, we had kind of our first filler episode. This was the first one where the plot didn't fully progress, set in motion a couple things like Fennec contacting the person at the end. Who was that? Is it Ventress? Is it Cad Bane? Who is it going to be? We're going to talk about that probably later in the stream as well as in predictions when you see that video. But other than that, this was kind of a soul-searching episode for Crosshair, very reminiscent of things I feel like we saw last year with Tech and Omega. You know, once Omega gets in touch with one of the characters, they really go through a little bit of a journey to rediscover themselves and what their role is in the batch. So we had that side, and then we had a cool mission where Wrecker was pretty awesome in the Bad Batch with Fennec. Sanak, what were your thoughts overall on this week's episode?
Yeah, I do agree. It was mostly a filler episode as far as the season goes. It was nice though to see Fennec Shan a little bit reestablished as who we saw her in Mando season 1 and 2 and her first appearance in the Bad Batch. I think the Book of Boba Fett really underused her, so seeing her have, I guess, a little bit more of a spine, be a little bit more in control of the situation, controlling and making use of like the inexperience of Hunter and Wrecker, even after a couple of years of being, bounty hunters themselves or smugglers or whatever the mission calls for. She's still like one of the top in their game despite her youth at this point in time. So I was pretty pleased to see that. And I think this episode, like you said, it was reminiscent of a lot of stuff from season 2 and a lot of the more simpler fillerish episodes of season 1. But I was not disappointed. I thought it was still fun, and I think it was good to see Wrecker especially have a little bit more time to shine. I was very surprised to see that he had a little bit more of like a negative reception to uh, Fennec, right? And like when he told her that like the the I guess the praying mantis sort of like
Yeah.
hunter. I don't know. I forget the name. But whatever their target's name was, right, had gone underground. She's like, "What do you mean underground?" He's just like, "Yes, underground. You heard that right." And like, she's like, "Oh, okay, my bad." Like, it was nice to see Wrecker has these moments where, yeah, he is still fairly trusting, fairly amiable with everybody. Likes to have fun for sure. But if he doesn't like somebody, he having him like be that the brawn, the muscle here, and have you stand up to people who you feel are using him, right? I thought that was nice. Always going to be a little disappointing for me because I think Wrecker has potential to grow in the same way that Tech and Hunter have, and especially Crosshair. He feels like he's being marginalized in the same way that Echo is, but I still feel like that Echo at least got some of that this season a little bit more with his dynamic with Omega, the way he's kind of bouncing back and forth. Wrecker has just been very static since season 1, since his chip was removed. So seeing him like have these moments where he could still be the typical characterization, but still, throw a few shots here and there, I thought it was really nice to see. Um, Overall, I mean, it's not much to think about. I think the most interesting thing to consider is that, Fennec doesn't lie. She is in it for the money. It doesn't matter if they're a traditional good guy or bad guy, and at least at this point in time. So seeing that she's contacted someone, I mean, who could it be? Could it be the Ventress tag, right? Could it be someone with the Empire? Me personally, I like a Boba Fett because it is dealing with clones. It'd be pretty interesting that way. Somehow, maybe Nala Sake has her own little like calm still after being arrested and all that. I don't know. I want it to be something that really drives the plot forward, and I think it'd be very cool if it is Ventress. But in my own Clone Wars heart, Clone Trooper heart, I'd love to see Boba's connection to Omega really be firmly established and really broached here.
Yeah, that would be awesome to see Boba. I still have the worry, a little bit about not diving into the richness of that story because that story should be told and it's something so interesting, but they've waited, if they do Boba, they've waited now till over halfway through the last season to touch
Yeah.
on Omega Boba. I feel like that's a missed opportunity if you just kind of brush it aside. Like I think it's super interesting, something I would really like to see at some point, but it would to me they'd have to really nail it if they do that. I think it is going to be Ventress based on next week. Or Cad Bane. I mean, we saw Fennec and Cad Bane have history. They fought. We know Cad Bane's in this season. It would be interesting to see that, or at least if she maybe Finnick and Cad Bane go on a mission, or the Bad Batch go on a mission with him. What I didn't expect from this episode, and it was the big thing that was kind of the one real surprise of this episode to me, was the idea of bounty hunters being hired by the Empire to hunt down people with a high M count. That to me was something that seems interesting and different based on everything this show's already told us about the way the Empire's operating with this mission. Like Project Necromancy is it's so hidden, it's so secret, like why reach out to bounty hunters to fulfill that mission, like that seemed a little surprising that it would be public information that out there, oh yeah, there's just a bunch of bounty hunters looking for people with high M counts. What does M count mean? Like they don't, I feel like that's kind of a giveaway at a lot of things. And also, if those bounty hunters, do they need to have a middleman or something so they don't know the location of the Tantus base? Like what's the association with all that? I found that quite interesting of a take. Could it be something like a certain guild is hired out to do it? That would be fascinating. You could maybe tie Talon Card or somebody back into that if like Talon Card's guild was hired to look for certain people. Like that would be a cool idea, but I feel like it needs to be more insulated than just every bounty hunter who's famous. They reach out and, and they're like, yeah, go find people with midichlorian accounts. And they're like, what does that mean? And they're like, if they could use the force, bring them back here. All right. Like, like that was an interesting little twist. I'd like to see how that develops here moving into the future. But yeah, as for this episode, moments with Crosshair and Omega were sweet, just like they were sweet last year with Tech. This whole season being Crosshair Omega, I think was a great way to try to redeem Crosshair. It has worked, and I like seeing him start to tackle his mental boundaries and really trying to push himself into moving on from his past. They're still kind of teasing out though that idea that yeah, it could be a mental block in terms of like he's just psychologically not ready to be the old Crosshair, but also it could be something that the Empire did program into him that he's not really aware of. And they're still kind of teasing that, which they started last week. Thought that was cool how they continued teasing it here. And I did enjoy all the Wrecker stuff. I mean, seeing classic Wrecker, punching crocodiles, like him going crazy against different creatures and really being the heavy, also the explosive expert in this. There was a nice use of his skill set, which has mostly been relegated to like walking around and delivering a funny line once in a while. So it was cool to be able to see him again. Other than that, that was basically the episode for me. I enjoyed it. Uh, I feel like it feels harsh to call it filler because last season we had so much filler. This season, this has kind of been it. But as the progression of the show, episode 1 through 7 all built on each other and carried the story forward. This one was kind of a side mission in order to get the story moving a little bit. So feels like the odd man out as of now. But hopefully next week we get some big payoff from it. But let us know what you guys think all in the chat. We'll bring in your questions here and we'll discuss them live for y'all so that we can give you our thoughts on your opinions. Or if you have theories for next week, let's talk about the Ventress possibility or the Cad Bane thing. And we talked about it a bit right now in our discussion here, but that's definitely going to be the big talking point. And I feel like we had this same exact thing in season one, right? Didn't we have Finnick contacting someone? We're like, who is she contacting? There was a whole conversation about that. Ended up being Nalase. Um, there's an interesting side of this again with another cliffhanger about who is Finnick trying to get in touch with, who knows about the MCAT count. And that's why the Ventress side would make the most sense because she's obviously force sensitive. So if she's involved in that sort of process, you would think she wouldn't be able to get involved in a sort of imperial process, right? Because they would know who she is. They'd be like, you were dead. What happened? How are you alive? That's why I'm still holding out hope that the logic of her being involved in bounty hunter missions for the Empire doesn't really make that much sense. The logic of that's still making me hold out on hope for the clone thing, or some type of dark magic, dark science that the Empire's doing. That she's part of Project Necromancer instead of actually being somebody just who's going to show up for one episode as a bounty hunter. But so I want to lean towards Cad Bane. But Sonic, which character do you really think it is at the end of that episode?
I mean, that's if we go into that, I want to save some of it for predictions, obviously, but I know it makes a lot of sense to go for a Ventress, and I have already mentioned that I think Boba Fett would still be a good option if you're trying to do sort of like a one-off episode where he has like some sort of crossing of paths with Omega, has some little bit more of an understanding of his, birthright in some ways, like why he's not necessarily got such a crazy M count. Because it'd be very interesting to me if they suddenly were like, "Oh, Boba's got a big M count," because then it's like, all right, well now you're just trying to make him a Jedi, then you're losing the part about him. But if you have him kind of be used to interrogate the idea of like he should theoretically be the same as Omega. We both know that they're pure, untouched, just unaltered clones of Django. Why did his sister essentially become like someone that has such a high M count? Why is she so desperately wanted by the Empire? And I think that would be something worthwhile for a single episode. My worry does then become like, okay, if we don't do him and we're doing Ventress, is 2 episodes enough? I don't know, especially if we hadn't even had like teases of her until maybe this episode. There's not too much. I can see the double episodes being enough for her, but then does that kind of begs the question to me, like, are we setting her up for meeting with Quinlan? Are we gonna set her up for her own show that's set during these dark times? And we get to maybe explore something with Crimson Dawn and Maul, and deal a little bit more with the darker underworld storytelling, and not necessarily have to do more than 2 or 3 seasons, just like they are here. I don't know. That is the difficult question right now. I will still defer to Ventress, but I'm trying to rack my brains to think about who else could be like thinking about this. Maybe if we're really trying to pull out characters like a Barriss, right? Being a Jedi, she would know about the M count. She would maybe take her, you know, as undercut of her reasoning was when she finally reappeared in the Clone Wars about how the Jedi are evil, they're doing all the wrong things, they're causing the strife in the galaxy. To me, it would be pretty fascinating if she managed to survive Order 66 and not be an Inquisitor, and instead now she's trying to prevent like any other M counts heavy people, like maybe hunting them down, killing them off, or like not necessarily like hiding them, but just being like, I can't let you fall into the wrong hands. Finds out about Omega and is like, oh, okay, maybe this is a great way for me to ensure that like I know that I find out this girl's being experimented on, that there's something special about her, that these clones are protecting her. If I knock her out of the equation, then I'm making sure that the Sith that have risen up, Vader and Palpatine, they don't get to continue, the more darker, harsher elements of the Jedi dogma and the way they were treating Force sensitives, right? I'd love to see a little bit of interrogation there with her character, but then if you do something like that, again, you need to almost like reintroduce her. It's been 10, 11 years since we saw her in
Mhm.
animation, right? So yeah, it would be hard for us to just say single episodes. Like whoever comes here now, think they have to almost like tag along to some degree with the rest of the story, even if they're not present in the final moments on Tantus or wherever this final season ends up being. They still need to like be there until that final push, that like 2 episode finale or something like that. And I really don't think it's Ventress or Quinlan. Those are the only two options. It'd be interesting if we did get into Quinlan's angle of into the story, and then maybe he goes with the Bad Batch to Dathomir, and then somehow we see the seeker, not the seeker, the water of life be used, and that one mysterious creature that produces the water of life in the Dark Disciple, maybe it awakens her or something. So that could be something that's like, oh man, like we can't let the Empire find out about this, that you can resurrect things, especially for Project Necromancer. That could be an angle where you keep Ventress limited and then focus on Quinlan. But other than them, I really don't know who else could come out of it. I
Yeah.
think it has to be just like the one person that's been teased this whole time in Ventress. And all I'll say at this point is locked away. Any other new character of sorts would need time to be developed into the story. Yeah, it really does feel like Ventress, Quinlan, or bust.
Yeah. I I mean, or Cad Bane, right? Like I think it's somebody popular because it's like they wouldn't hide it if it was somebody that like only a few fans would know, you know. That's why I love the idea of maybe trying to bring back Talon Card at some point. And if you want to try tie him to Tantus, that would be a cool idea, but like it's not gonna happen in a off screen because like the majority of people will be like, who the hell is that guy? And then they would want us fans in this type of format to be like hyping it up for weeks, like, no, Talon Card, he's the coolest, like you guys are
Yeah.
gonna love him. So if it was that type of character, somebody who was just a side character, didn't matter, like, can you imagine? I would really hate this, but can you imagine if next week it's revealed that it's the Martez sisters? That would be just a gut punch. That would be such a gut
I
punch.
I know that's
Um,
your like biggest nightmare. That's
that is a nightmare. That's an absolute nightmare. You guys, like everybody in the chat, I think would agree with me. Like that would be awful if it was the Martez sisters. Um, yeah, it can't be them. So no, no Martez sisters, please. Other than that, it can be any character with a name that we haven't seen. But yeah, I mean, Boba, Ventress, Cad Bane are my top three. I think Boba is the lowest on that top three because he hasn't been revealed to be in the show yet. They haven't animated Boba since season 4, so that would be a bit of an upgrade. Bringing him part of the story now would seem out of place. He is a bounty hunter though, and bounty hunters are coming a part of the story. It would make sense, but we this this episode also took a big chunk of stuff from the trailer that we hadn't seen, so we're starting to catch up on the trailer now. It's like the Ventress shot, the Cad Bane shot, and the turbo tank shot. Those are some of the strongest ones we haven't seen, most memorable parts of the trailer we haven't seen. So I think seeing that would be quite interesting. But I do think the setup, like I think Cad Bane can't be ruled out because of the setup already between in season 1 with just the fact that Finnick and Cad Bane know each other and they aren't unfriendly towards each other. You know, they have a rivalry and they shoot at each other because they're bounty hunters and they're after the same bounty. But it's not. It's there's a relative mutual respect there. There's not. too much of a crazy rivalry if you want to keep it inside the Fett family. You know, if Finnick's worked with Boba before, if Boba's obviously been with Cad Bane in the past, it would make sense to have Cad come back. And I think that would be, I think that's the lowest tier of like reveal of don't show him on screen. But, you know, I was expecting to hear the voice or something at least. But yeah, almost the fact though that that like if it was Ventress or if it was Cad too, like they've already shown him in the trailer. You would think maybe they would show him in the episode too, right? Like won't be, I mean, it'll be exciting that next week is the episode we deal with them, but it's not a reveal. You know, what is it the possibility, you know, like a Boba or somebody else that, hey, you know, they haven't shown, if they're not showing him in this episode, maybe they haven't shown this character at all. But then that really opens the door. Like, who could it possibly be? Um, I know you said Quinlan, but like Quinlan, I don't know. Do you think he'd be
Yeah.
working with bounty hunters? I feel like he'd only get back on board if it was a Ventress thing. Could we get into that the path idea? But the path, like, man, it just seems like so many things to open up a can of worms for to not follow through with in this season. But you know, my theory constantly being the fact that this season is going to be a setup for whatever shows next. You know, building off of it, it's not going to. I don't think it's going to end super definitively for anybody but the Bad Batch. Um, it could. I mean, you could have Quinlan show up, and that could be a setup for a future show where they go into the path and that whole idea of the surviving Jedi post Order 66 and how they get around. You can bring back Haja, and you can bring back all these other characters who help get people involved in the path, or other Jedi that might have survived. Ahsoka, you know, having an animated Ahsoka show would be, you know, something they usually do. Be interesting to see if that was the idea. But yeah, Trent says another great episode. W. Well, yeah, we're glad you enjoyed the episode, Trent. We definitely enjoyed it. Um, where would you say this ranks amongst the episodes for the season for you, Sanak?
Amongst the season, dang, it's definitely not top three. I'll give you that. It is. I mean, it wasn't. I think the nicest thing about this episode was that it didn't overstay too much, right? And it still did things that
Yeah.
were beneficial, right? It still did things that I felt were like, okay, now I can see, like you said, and our review portion, like Crosser is finally broaching with AZ1 and with Omega, like, hey, this is not something physical anymore. This is not something you can squeeze away. It's something he has to really process. So like that was great, and it didn't like in season two. I think that would have been like a half of an episode and like just uncut. Whereas here they
Yeah.
were just going back to it when it was necessary, right? To like still play off more of their humor and banter. Um, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I would say it's definitely of the same level as like a different approach when Omega and Cross are first escaping
Hmm.
from Tantus and they crash landed. I think it is very close. I don't know. I think just in terms of it being a bit more fun with its action, I would give it a little bit of a small edge over that episode. And I really like that episode too because we've seen all the consecutive developments have really paid off for that relationship here. But I don't know. I guess I'd get of the 7 episodes we've seen, I'd put it maybe sixth place because of that. Everything else has been much better to me or has done something really important to the plot.
Yeah.
And yeah, I can't say the fourth episode has necessarily done anything that made me go like, oh, this is super impactful to the plot. It just wrapped up something that we thought was going to be way more of like an ongoing
Right.
issue and arc for this season.
Right. Yeah, I would say it's in my bottom three of the season. But it's still, I mean, this season's been really solid all the way through. Like, I feel like that's the word to describe this season. I can't say that anything has like blown my mind yet in this season, but I've enjoyed every week, and every week I look forward to watching because it's been so good and because it's really been strong and carried throughout the whole thing. So, this one taking a little bit of a sidestep doesn't necessarily affect my enjoyment because it feels it's a fun, like, top tier, I think, Bad Batch side mission episode. Like, we had so many in season 1 and 2 side mission episodes that this one is on a little bit higher level. The action was great. The moments for characters were good, and we still develop a little bit along the way instead of like I think back to last year, the way season two would zigzag development episodes, like you'd go from something interesting, and then we have the tech episode where he is racing for Sid, like that just feels like something that's completely in a vacuum. Even though it grows his character, it doesn't really have anything to do with anything. It's just he decides to help Sid that day. Do we need to see that mission? Probably not. Where this time, this mission at least helped them advance what their goals are, even if the
Yeah.
plot itself didn't move forward. So it's bottom three of the season for me, just especially because I enjoyed the Tantus stuff. Like the first episode might not have had much happen, but I grouped together with the other three or the other two. Really enjoyed it. Obviously, the Palpatine episode was great. Last week's two episodes were great. And I really enjoyed the episode where they went back to the ice planet and dealt with Crosshair and Hunter's demons. So enjoyed all that. So yeah, I think by default it falls to that bottom three, but it was still an enjoyable episode. Getting back to the chat here, Colton Smith says Crosshair and Omega duo has been great this season. Crosshair's character development has been a great part of the show. Yeah, I completely agree with you, Colton. It's been one of the backbones of the whole season for sure as a character arc, because we've seen so much growth out of Omega, Hunter, Tech in the last seasons. Echo, he's kind of off in his own thing now. Wrecker was never going to get that much development, so now it's our time to really go into Crosshair. Great character in season one, great moments last season. I'm loving that they're really making him the kind of the heart and soul of the show this season.
Yeah, no, I mean it's nice to see that the most interesting character of the whole show is still able to impact these episodes that don't necessarily feature him, and he has had arguably of all the Star Wars shows that we've gotten on Disney Plus, maybe the biggest exploration of what it means to try to make up for your mistakes, understanding your perspective for why you made those mistakes, right? And understanding it's not necessarily black and white, right? That sort of redemption only comes from people who are willing to believe that you're putting in that effort too, right? Like it's a very complicated affair, and the fact that they've taken 2 seasons almost now to like really examine how he kind of comes to this point and now how he's trying to like return and become something once more. Yeah, I really like that. I think Omega too, now that she's like got a little bit past the snark and now is more just cracking jokes with the whole Bad Batch, and she's not like just told to be a kid. And I know this episode explicitly, Hunter's like, no, stay. We're not going to put you in harm. Like this is something we have to do, right? But everything else, they treat her as just an equal. She's no longer just someone tagging along, and I think I really like that because now it lets her stand up to Crosshair, and he respects that entirely. And
Mm-hmm.
now he's learning from her, right, with the meditation, and he's taking her jokes. The fact that there's a banter between them after being so like emotionally tortured and versus like, oh, it's so sweet and naive and wanting to do something, right? They've had a shared experience that makes it so much easier for them to at least appreciate like the efforts that the other makes for each other.
Right. Yeah, completely agree. And it's such a nice dynamic. It's one of my favorite things they've done with the show this season. And really one of the best things I feel like they've been building to since season one, this idea of Omega constantly being the one who's kind of redeeming everybody. It's nice to see such opposites. Somebody that Crosshair frankly didn't like at all in season one.
No.
They have, yeah, that initial conversation, those initial dynamics all the way back in the first episode, and then seeing it all come full circle here has been something certainly rewarding in this season. Weapon says something I've been noticing is that all of the episodes in the past that people claimed were filler are having moments become relevant this season, or at least a lot of callbacks to them. Some examples being Omega bringing up Gunji and Kashyyyk, or seeing the moon near Ryloth again and having it be the spot where they all reunite. Definitely. I think that's a good point. And, it is nice in these long running animated shows. It's always nice to make callbacks. The best ones always kind of do. Rebels, did it a lot. Avatar: The Last Airbender did it a lot. When you start to get towards the end, you bring back a bunch of stuff from early on. And I think the thing with the Bad Batch that it's always struggled with, because you can look at something like Rebels, right? Or I think Rebels, frankly, is was a victim of the 22 episode to 24 episode a season seasons. It worked for Clone Wars because every 3 episodes you start a new story, right? Rebels is a lot tougher because you're following the
Yeah.
same set of characters. There weren't too many offshoots. When you do offshoot adventures, they were all one episode. So it felt more like you were having filler in between story beats versus Clone Wars. Constantly were starting new stories. It didn't really even feel like it was a episode 26. Like it just kept going. Um, so in a way, Rebels was a victim of that, but certainly had its filler moments, but had good callbacks when we got to the finale. All these characters show up from season 1, 2, 3 that helped them along the way, right? Avatar as well, but Avatar in a lot of ways was a journey show. Every time there was something that was kind of a little bit filler in Avatar, you had them inching their way closer to where they were trying to get going. I think where the Bad Batch started to struggle in season 2 was it didn't really have a direction for these characters, right? They were just existing. They were surviving by taking away kind of the Omega fetch quest idea of like the Empire needing to find her. Then these characters were left with just like they were left floating. They didn't connect with the clones. They didn't really care about what the clone identity problem was going on with the rest of the galaxy. They only had each other. And so when we have these episodes where they're building off of that, it was something that they had to really pull back from the rest of the story and be like, okay, let's tighten up on just Crosshair, or I mean, Tech and Omega this episode, or Hunter and Omega this episode, or Hunter and Wrecker, building these dynamics, but it did feel like it pulls you out of the rhythm of the main piece of the story. That's why, for me, giving so much praise to this season, because we have an objective and we're still getting our way towards that objective every episode, even if certain episodes decide to tell a certain character story. So I don't I say all that to say, like, I still don't know necessarily if you can't call some of those episodes filler from season 2 or season 1, but it is nice that when you bring it back, it does make the show feel a bit more cohesive.
Yeah, no, totally agree. Totally agree. It's nice to see that as sort of a season two truther, right? I have been the one who's been a little bit more staunchly like, no, like there's something really like interesting. And I mean, I'm not just saying that because I have the poster up there. You can't really see it, all right? But when it said the long road ahead, I was like, okay, that makes a lot of sense. Like this will be almost like desolate in its storytelling. Sometimes things will just feel like, okay, that happened. Okay, we're just here existing, kind of drifting. And maybe that is a little bit of a challenge to put as a show, but who's to say that like if you're not a clone, right, like that has found a sort of elevated position within the empire, who's to say that you're having an interesting life? You're discarded canonically and in Legends, right? Or I guess in Legends, a lot of them became instructors and hated their human recruits. And I think this is something even more essential to what has always been an issue with the clones. Like, are they truly humanized? Are they truly seen as people in the galaxy, as their own group that has their own rights, that has a necessary place in the galaxy post usefulness, right? How are they any different than the droids that they're fighting against? And I don't think Legends always really understood that by the nature of it, with the prequels coming out after a lot of the original trilogy onwards exploration in those stories. But what the canon has really nailed for me, especially here with Bad Batch, is that like, yeah, they are like just wasted away. They are used for future plans for the Empire as nothing more than like meat and flesh, right? They're meat bags, as HK-47 described them. They're nothing more, right? I think that's what was something about season two is like, yeah, some of it feels kiddie, some of it feels like whatever. And like I'm never gonna fully deny that the Sid episodes got on my nerve too, right? Like such a late like example would be like the late season episode with
Season 1.
in season, this one's from season 2. It was uh what's his name? It starts, we saw him in season 3 with his mother at the very start. Durden or whatever his name is,
Yeah, the Deveronian guy.
Deveronian guy, right? That came in so late into the season that I was like, why am I looking up like an episode with them like doing their own like Temple of Doom run underneath with like a bunch of spider webs and all this, when
I think
there's
that
like
was
things
season
that,
1, was
is
it
that
not?
season 1? Maybe I see
I thought it
that
was the end of season 1.
maybe I'm completely missing that there, but yeah, like why do I care about these episodes, right? Well, you kind of have to understand that their life is kind of withering away in some ways. That the only thing they really care for in this group specifically is to protect Omega. And now that she's kind of grown into becoming, something of herself, now their focus is back on Crosshair. Okay, he's here now. Like, how do we deal with that? But once those two things are leveled up, maybe they all die for Omega. Maybe, Crosshair's the one to sacrifice and they all live along. I would not be surprised if like we have an epilogue of them just 20 years in the future, being super old, being asked by Rex, like, hey, we got these rebels here, a Jedi, two Jedi who think they could really help us out along with Ahsoka and all that. Are you guys game? And they'll be like, nah, we did our thing, right? And that could be one of the most beautiful testaments about the Bad Batch as a group, that they learned to become their own individuals, that they didn't need a purpose that's dependent solely on war, right? That they escaped the plan, the goal of the Empire to just make them discarded pile of trash, right? And I think that's where season 2 can shine for me, like you're saying here, Travis, and Weapon, right? That these things keep on being referenced now in season 3. These things are shown once more, right? They're not changing the galaxy. We thought maybe in season 1 the Bad Batch would be like the group that inspired like clone rebellions and all that. No, now they're just more like individuals trying to do the right thing, and they've found their own family and they're trying to keep it like that and help out where they can. But otherwise, if the conflict ends, now I think they truly be okay with it. Now they truly know how to live.
Right. Yeah, I think I completely agree, and they've done a good job of bringing them back into the fight. Like season 1 ends, you feel like that bonding moment, right? They're standing on the platform on Camino watching Topoka City sink, their home being destroyed. It felt like a bonding moment for them. It felt like, okay, they're in this fight now. Look what the Empire did to their home, even if they don't care about the other clones. Look what happened to their home. And then we jump to like, they're actually just still working for Sid. That was
Yeah.
always kind of like the jarring part of season 2, was it just kind of took them away from the direction it felt like season 1 was going, almost in a way where it feels like season 2, a lot of what's there was like, well, we want to make it at least 3 seasons. How do we stretch it out while also giving, we have some interesting story idea, but
Yeah.
really you could have crammed a lot of it into season 3, or like a longer extended 20 episode season 3, or extended season 1, make just 2 long seasons. But they decided to make season 2 and put a bunch of character development stuff, which is fine, but it's just like, it feels like the show was disjointed, because
Yeah.
I knew there
Yeah.
was something, that racer episode I was talking about with Tech, which also was like my least favorite title. I remember back then we were trying to predict what the hell faster was going to mean. But I was trying to remember what episode came before that. So I looked it up, and it was the Cody and Crosshair episode, so that's just with season 2, right? We go these highs. You're like, we're back. And then the next 3 episodes were like something random. And I think that was the frustration across season 2. But I'm looking forward to all this stuff coming back and tying in, and coming to a head this season. I can't wait for the Bad Batch and the Deveronians and Sid and the Bartez sisters and all of them to team up and fight off Hemlock on Tantus.
Yeah.
It might happen, actually. It might, but hopefully it's just the clones.
We shall
uh,
see.
Well, yeah, waiting anxiously for that. Travis Mitchell says, "How's it going, guys? Really enjoyed the episode, even if the best storyline was Crosshair and Omega sitting on a rock." Hey, sometimes it's the simple stuff that works,
Yeah.
especially when they're in doses like that.
Yeah.
Travis also said, if all the filler episodes are coming full circle, I'm hoping that in the finale, the tidal wave from season 2 comes back and helps out. Yeah, are you talking about the Pabu episode where we first get to Pabu? And that would be interesting if we, like season or we kind of expect the transition point for the final third of this season, the third act of this season, to be that rating of Pabu that we've seen in the trailer. So if it is the case, maybe the citizens of Pabu are like, yeah, well, they can take Pabu, but we're just going to let the empire completely get destroyed by tidal waves and all drown. So maybe that's their little revenge they can pull out or defense mechanism. Be interesting to see it come back.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we will per se, because it does seem like the Empire is going to knock out every possible chance of, you know, nature or the people of Pabu resisting, right? I think that will make the tone of the last third hit harder and be really depressing. Because I don't know. I mean, that raises the question: is do you guys in chat? Do you think, Liam, like this is gonna be like a very depressing end in the sense that like things are not achieved, right? They've only managed to stop some things to save Omega, but have to sacrifice a lot more. I don't know, but yeah, I don't think Pabu is something that they're gonna be able to hold on to.
I don't think so either, but it seems, with these Star Wars animated shows or just Star Wars in general, we do
Yeah,
usually have that silver lining of like, yeah, we may have lost this battle, but we still are going to fight and win the war type of thing. We may have only destroyed Tantus, but there's a long way to go. In fact, there's 20 more years of fighting to go, but we're on our way to achieving victory. I think it's going to be that type of hoorah type of rallying cry for the Bad Batch here. I still don't think they're all going to die. I really do. I don't see them all dying. I think Crosshair is the only one that has a good shot of dying. If they do that, I mean, you know me, I'm always like in it for a good death for these characters. I think it adds a lot of weight and gravitas to the storytelling, not just the characters, not just for dramatic heft, not just to like try to be cry inducing moments or really try to up your emotions in these scenes. It's not just for those reasons. It's really more so to just add dramatic heft to this type of storytelling, to Star Wars animation. Clone Wars had it, like we knew in the arc format people could just die anytime, and we saw
yeah,
characters who were introduced and seemed like main characters in the first episode of an arc, all of a sudden in the second episode of the arc they're killed. So it felt like it had that weight to it that Rebels and Bad Batch haven't really had. The tech death, if obviously he stays dead, which right now it seems like it, that would be some dramatic heft. Whoever dies at the end of this season, that's some weight, and it gives credence to the art form to where like we feel the elevation of it in Star Wars animation, where when we can watch the next episode and as older viewers or adults, we can be like, hey, this actually has merit. Like these guys could die. There could be something where we're actually emotionally stirred by what's going on here instead of just enjoying the fun of it. That's why I always kind of root for characters to have good, exciting deaths in these shows. But I think Crosshair is going to be the one to go.
yeah. It feels like Crosshair would be at peace, right? Like maybe that is his form of meditation, protecting his family, having their full love and trust once more, maybe giving like a proper goodbye to all of them to ensure that Omega is free from whatever curse that has been lingering, right? Why the Empire is so obsessed with her. What
Yeah.
is truly special about her? Being able to maybe in some ways free her of that, I think would be a great ending for him. I get the vibe though that maybe you could see like a Wrecker die because he feels very like Gregor in Rebels vibes to me, where it's like he
Yep, I
doesn't
can
really
see that.
have too much of a purpose, right? And he's gonna have some funny moments, and he's very much coded the same way, where he's very goofy and silly and having fun, and then you know he has to make that sacrifice or things he just gets killed, right? Like that. I don't know if people will say that they loved how Rebels handled Gregor's death, but I thought for where he was in life after all those brain injuries, That was like the most normal we saw him. The moment he got shot in the chest and he hurled someone down, and he could give like that emotional end to Rex. Like, I'm just happy I could fight for my own cause with my brothers. Right? I was like, dang, I didn't realize Gregor still had that in him. So I could see maybe Wrecker having something similar.
Mhm.
But yeah, I don't know who else at this point. I guess Hunter, right? And we've talked about this on the lives too, that it's Hunter and Crosshair together, like the two
Yeah,
halves of the Bad Batch, closing
exactly.
out any chance of like Omega being hunted for the rest of her life, right? That could be it. Um, but I think if that something like that happens, I want a little bit more individual development for Hunter to happen in this last third for sure.
Yeah, agree too. He hasn't gotten touched on really since season one. It was great to have that little episode back, and I think the fifth episode of this season to really show him and Crosshair that dynamic, and them being opposite sides. It was something that worked in season one. Never really having them ever see each other in season two, that took away a bit from Hunter as well. So hopefully they keep pushing that. Travis also says that really the only bad episode for me with the Bad Batch was the one with the kids stealing their ship. The rest I found consistently decent. Yeah, season two, that was
Yeah.
another arc that was like,
It was a two
it,
episode one, right? Yeah, I
yeah.
forgot about that.
And that first art, episode was okay. I felt like when they get trapped in that cave after the stampede, and Omega and Tech are talking. I keep wanting to say Crosshair because this year it is Crosshair that she's talking to all the time. But it was
Yeah.
Omega and Tech talking, and they're trapped on one side, and the Wrecker and Hunter are on the other side, and they're having their chats about life and way to see the world. Um, yeah, that was all right, but it was we felt like we had seen a lot of tech development already, so it felt a little redundant. But then, yeah, that following episode, it was like freeing the kids and doing all that. That felt like typical Bad Batch side adventures, and definitely wasn't one of my favorites either.
Yeah, I it was interesting to see how kids could be on these forgotten worlds treated like be like the basis of like so much imperial operations where they don't necessarily start the slavery, they just kind of come in and ramp it up further, which I thought was an interesting look. And especially, the galaxy's torn up, right? It's been destroyed by the Clone Wars at this point, seeing how people had to deal with that, like especially younger kids who didn't really get to live their lives. I thought that was interesting as a concept. Execution, I was like, okay, like it's whatever.
Yeah. And Travis says Sid seems like somebody who would be a cashier at Walmart.
Yeah,
I love it. I love the comparison. Uh,
deserves to be at best, and let's not disrespect the Walmart cashiers. I don't think they'd sell out the Bad Batch the same way.
yeah, the more morals and conviction. Yeah, I mean, I didn't hate Sid. It's just the episode she forced us to go through was the thing I really didn't like. And then also she turns on our characters, so not the
Yeah,
best ending for her. Travis also says, I speculate we could find out the batch was only designed to live through the length of the Clone Wars, hence why Crosshair and Tech look a little older. Interesting. That's an interesting thought. I would say I don't necessarily agree, but it would be cool if that was like they had a shorter lifespan on them. I feel like that would be something that would have carried through the show. That was like some type of like, oh, Omega's got the Bad Batch protecting him. Well, we just have a kill switch for him already, and just
yeah, that would
press it.
be shocking.
Like, so I think that would be a little surprising. I think Tech obviously he looks weathered because he was experimented on for like 2 years. So he or not Tech,
uh,
Echo. Uh,
Echo, yeah.
Tech has the receding hairline. I think they're just supposed to make him look like he's like, thoughtful, wizened,
Every
and then
80s IT guy.
like Crosshair has the scars, like we don't, we forget
Yeah.
he got burned. His face got burned in season one. That was like a big plot point that nothing really ever came of. I remember back in the day, we were like, oh, what could happen to Crosshair? Now he got the burns. It was nothing really. He had already taken out his chip, and yeah, that whole thing was just to give him a rugged, scarred look.
Yeah.
Travis
I don't
also
know.
says, oh, sorry, you
Oh,
go
no,
ahead.
go ahead, go ahead.
Be thankful we never got an episode with the batch having to take care of a baby and Wrecker saying, guys, I think he just had an accident.
Well, definitely am now. Thanks for raising up that fear.
I'm surprised they didn't do that. Feels like the way you read it there, I feel like I've watched that now. Like I feel like it already happened. Let's see. Travis says, "Oh no, I meant the tidal wave showing up for the Avengers team up on
Oh my
Tantus
god.
with the Martez sisters. Yeah, they could be riding it, surfing it. That would be awesome. It'd
I
be
think that
such a
would
great
definitely
moment for
redeem
them.
them. Yeah, if they came on it specifically.
Yeah, them surfing on it with Sid. Sid's like windsurfing. Yeah, they arrive there in boats. Yeah, that would be awesome. hopefully, hopefully the showrunners have time to change it if that's what they haven't done for the finale, so that they're watching the stream. Obviously, they're going to be like, "Shoot, we
Of
got to delay
course.
the finale,"
Of
because
course.
that's a great idea. Hunter will narrate is from over how the war is far from over, and then a Linkin Park song will play. Yeah, yeah, that would
Yeah,
be
why
really
didn't why
fascinating.
didn't Clone Wars season 1 do that, man? That was peak time for it.
Yeah, it would have been peak for Linkin Park for sure.
Yeah.
It seems like something that they brought the like guitar riffs in the Clone Wars movie. Maybe they
Yeah.
were inspired a little bit by the Rock at the time.
Yeah, I mean, I will say one underrated part about this episode was when they go to the cantina to meet with,
Yeah,
Fennec. I was like, "Oh, this is like music I would actually just listen to unironically." Like, it sounded pretty good.
good music and cool cantina too. Like it's
Yeah.
more scum and villainy than we've seen from Bad Batch cantinas thus far. Usually, it's a bunch of people sitting down having fun, playing games and drinking. This one was the people shooting each other and actually having shady business dealings. I enjoyed that little change of pace as well. Colton says, I completely agree with you, Liam. A part of the reason why I love Clone Wars was that it was brutal at times. Multiple deaths of Bad Batch would be the best ending storyline decision. Yeah, I think if it works, I mean, I'm not calling for them all to die again. I think if it works story wise, I always prefer a character to have a good death than to live on in a convenient way that takes away a bit from the stakes. Not to go into Last Jedi, but like the way Finn, was saved in the Last Jedi, I thought, okay, not the best storyline for Finn in Last Jedi, but this could be a cool way for him to have a big moment. Um, Finally give him something of importance to do, and then they swing it. I just don't want that to happen. It happens a lot in Star Wars where we have characters, they're set up to do something epic, they do it, they're fallen, they're about to die, and then somebody comes and grabs them. It's like we've seen
Yeah.
that so many times. If you give it a little bit more heft if they go out, not not saying I don't want more of this character, but it just if you're designing the story to work that way, like you as the writers are the ones putting these characters in that situation. If you want to put them in a situation where it doesn't feel like they're about to die, then they don't have to die. But if you put them in a situation where it feels like okay, they're about to die, it's the audience is invested in that. We're going to be like, we want that, we semi want to see it because, or oh no, we don't want to see it, and we're instantly invested in what's going on versus if you pull back and you say they're about to oh, but actually no, somebody saved it. Like that's happened so many times in so
Yeah.
many movies. It just always feels a little cheap to me. That's why I always root for them to go all the way with the character deaths.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'd love if we got that Rogue One-esque ending. That's what we all thought back in 2013, 2014 when Rebels was first announced, but then the TVY7 kind of guaranteed that they wouldn't die, right? Like I thought if they're gonna die, they'd be on like Alderaan, and that's where the show ended. And then you see like the Death Star pop in. It's like, oh no, don't do this to us, right? Like that's how I thought. That's how they'd avoid, like the
Yeah.
censors, like the age rating. But this is more TV PG, and Star Wars has had a history of pushing that TV PG to an extreme, man.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of season 3 to, I mean, not even. Let's talk season 2, right? They had to cut out Ventress
Yeah.
killing. Was it Commander? What's his name? wasn't Fox, it
Colt,
was someone else.
Colt, right?
Colt, yeah, Commander Colt,
That was
and then
season.
she,
I
like
think that was season 3 with
oh, yeah, okay, yes, yeah,
Camino.
because season 3 was when we had the the team up of
The-
Domino Squad, right,
Yeah,
from the flashback, right? Yeah, so season 3, and then the next episode, they have, Echo and Fives, like, protecting Camino, with 99 and all that, and then you see Colt, who already had, like, the cool, like, what is it? The prototype Phase 2 armor, but
yeah.
then he gets
Arc of the
stabbed,
Covenant.
right? And then Ventress just kisses him, and I'm like, "Oh my god," like, they had to, like, the next time it aired, it was just gone, like, they're like they just refused to let that happen, right? But at least when Lucas and Filoni were working together, they definitely pushed the censors a bit. I think if anything, Filoni was maybe like the tempering voice of like, "George, you can't do that, man. Like this is not allowed on TV." But we saw Umbaro, we saw like all the stuff with the wrong Jedi. We saw a lot of really
Yeah.
powerful, impactful death. So
Oh,
if they want to kill them off, it's not like impossible. It would definitely hurt a lot of kids and a lot of young adults watching it because compared to other clones that have had that arc format to be like, I got familiar with them and then I say goodbye until like 4 seasons later, or I see them for that arc and then they die. We've seen them throughout their own arc in the Bad Batch arc of the Clone Wars, and then now 3 seasons worth, and we've already seen the effect of one of them dying. Now, if all of
mhm.
them die, like wow, I don't know. I think that might be
Yeah.
too much of a hard hitting thing.
Yeah, I don't think they're all gonna die, but it
Yeah,
would be. I think the perfect thing would be Hunter Crosshair. I mean, we talked about it already because of all the thematic reasons. But again, they just have to be put in those situations. If the writers choose to put them in the situations, follow through. If they choose to make them go on a mission where everything goes completely fine, then that's also fine. I'm not expecting people to die in an animated show, especially when it still works. We have clones surviving into Return of the Jedi now, so like it still fits. It's not something where you're like, you have to kill them off, otherwise it makes no
yeah,
sense. It'll still fit fine. It's just I think add that heft to it would be real interesting. Yeah, the one I always go back to in the Clone Wars is pre Vizsla. Like the way the way so they had the fight, right? Then pre Vizsla just accepts his
yeah,
death and he like sticks his neck out there and Maul raises the dark saber above his head. Then you get that pan that just slightly goes behind one of the Death Watch members' bodies as the blade cuts off Previsla's head. And I remember watching that live and going, "Wow." Like at
yeah,
that time I was I think already 14 or so and watching it live and I was like, "Dang, like our even I knew the show is not necessarily for kids anymore." That's why I'm probably still really enjoying it at 14 versus when I started the show back when I was like 10,
yeah,
so yeah, that was the big one for me. And then next episode they kill Satine, so just keep
yeah.
going with the brutality of that arc.
And you can
Um,
still kind of see his head roll off to the side. You just don't
uh-huh.
see detail on it, which is like, oh man, yeah,
Yeah, definitely. It reminded me a lot of Dooku's beheading in the Revenge of the Sith.
yeah.
All right. Travis says, "Do you guys think we'll get Boba? It would be weird to not have at least a cameo, given how his girlfriend, his nemesis, and his sisters are all here." Uh,
By girlfriend, I'm assuming Fennec. By nemesis, Cad Bane, and his sister, obviously Omega.
yeah.
Uh, I don't know,
Well, we
Liam. What do
talked
you think?
about it a little bit earlier in the stream, but I mean, I'm pro Boba in what you kind of described earlier, Cynic, as like, okay, a little cameo appearance. Maybe he's only working with a couple members of the Bad Batch. I'm pro Boba almost if he doesn't meet Omega. But if he meets Omega, I really want that storyline to actually have some weight and some gravity. Like that's something you could have done in season 2 that
Yeah,
would have made Omega so much more interesting, and it wouldn't have had to connect to anything else since there wasn't much of a plot for season 2 until the last 4 or 5 episodes. So to me, that would have been something that would have been really cool to play out, come up with the idea of okay, they're the alpha versus the omega, play on Boba's hubris, as being, well, I'm, the only one that was created to be my father's son. I was the one created to be the next Jango Fett.
yeah,
And play up that whole idea of what it means to Boba more so than even what it means to Omega. So I would prefer no, unless it is just like Hunter and Wrecker saying, "Yeah, we're going to go on one more mission with Finnick and Boba," and you leave Omega home still. Then I'm cool with it.
Yeah, and I mean, I agree to a sense that like it would be almost like too much to put in right now, but like so much of the Tantus plot and Necromancer still not really being fully explored along with what makes Omega special. But if there is anyone who can like emphasize the specialness of Omega and still not be happy about it, it would be Boba, right? Like you're saying, Django wanted him as the unaltered clone of him to be raised as his son, to him to be finding out that like his father's wishes were in some ways partially denied by Nala Se, right? That there is someone just like him in every way, but somehow special. That
Mm-hmm.
would be frustrating, right? That would be something that, he'd want to, you know, have some sort of like reckoning with. Is it a one episode reckoning? I don't think so, right? But at the same time, I just want to see this man in his, his almost like unspoiled Boba Fett armor, right? I think he would be like really special, and yeah, I mean, in a way, like he is because he's also unaltered, right? Like wouldn't Hemlock also want to see if there's something special about Django's blood as in its purest form that can be replicated if he whatever sample that he has left of Omega, right? Maybe he can just multiply it because it's the same exact DNA or something. I don't know. Like there are ways to bring him in. Do we have the time for it? Is the bigger question. Is he a priority? I don't know. I just want him to show up, look cool. We get to see him maybe reveal an essential piece of information that they need for Tantus or about Hemlock or something. Have a moment with Omega, be like, you know, this is not the right time. If you make it out right, like I did, right, then we'll see about your life, right? Like what this means between us. But having it almost be like, a little bit of chilly front between them, I think wouldn't hurt, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Omega should live her whole life thinking that, and she knows I'm pretty sure she knows she's not the only one. It'd be very interesting if she's even older than Boba and she knows, like, oh yeah, like this guy was there too in the tank next to me. He was like, he's the closest in age to me compared to you guys or something, but do we have time to deal with that? I don't know. Unless, I will die on this hill. What if they just, suddenly drop like a Dark Disciple animated feature where we do get to see Boba and then he can have a cameo in one of these episodes that it just drops concurrently at the same time as a Ventress episode or something, right? Then I'd be totally like, yeah, do whatever you want with Boba in the season now. You've given me Dark Disciple. I really can't complain.
Yeah, I'll take that if we get Dark Disciple. They should do that. People have been saying that for years. Any of these books, like
Crystal
it
Christ
just
is another great
makes
arc
so
too.
much sense. Yeah, all those unfinished arcs, but the books, like you have all this material right here that people do enjoy. You can have that corporate synergy. You could sell more books. You get people who are book fans to watch Disney Plus. Why not? And
Yeah.
DC's made a career on doing that. Make it better than DC's been making it, but if you do early DC, why not? It's a gold mine just sitting there of stories. Like if you did a I mean, this would be a big can of worms also, but like if you did a Thrawn trilogy adaptation like fans do on the internet, but you do a real professional one that comes out at the same time or right after, right before Filoni's movie, hype it up, get people to read those books, be interested and invested. What's the harm, other than fans complaining, but they're going to complain regardless. Like,
Yeah.
why not for a business decision? I think it makes a heck of a lot of sense, but we'll see. I doubt it ever happens. They have to get real desperate probably for it to start to happen one day, but who knows? Oh, Travis says that yeah, the dirty diaper joke was in the Clone Wars movie, yeah, with Rhoda with Stinky.
Yeah. Oh boy.
Yep. Uh, I remember that very well. Have a soft spot in my heart for the Clone Wars movie, even if every time I've watched it since I saw it for the first time in 2008, it's gotten worse. But yeah, it did start the whole thing. Gotta give it credit for that.
Yeah.
Travis also says, I could see Boba under the false mentorship of Cad Bane, who's just manipulating him, maybe tricking him into going after his own sister without telling him
Mm,
who it is. That would be an interesting plot point as well, but I don't think we have time to go into all that to really give like Cad Bane and Boba POV in the
yeah.
show. Like if they show up, it's going to be as supporting characters like Finnick was in this episode. Doesn't mean we can't cut to them for one or two scenes, but they're not going to get their own half of an episode, I don't think, at this point. Especially the way this season's structured, with the double episodes being kind of the turning point of each third of the season. I don't really see this plot point with the bounty hunters really carrying further past next week and whatever the repercussions are from next week to episode 10 and 11 in 2 weeks. So we'll see with that one. As for Boba and Cad Bane, though, like I know this is the point in the timeline when they should be far past working with each other.
Yeah.
That being said, since it's not something we actually have seen in a movie or a book or a comic book or anything officially, they could try to change it up and move with it in a different way, maybe a reluctant partnership or something like that. But I think that mentorship of Cad Bane, this would be too late in the timeline to go back on that with some things they've hinted at in visual design, even if they haven't confirmed necessarily through outright storytelling yet.
Yeah, no, I mean that's what I wanted to address. Like there is concept art from the Bad Batch from his appearance in season one, where he has actually got that skull cap from when he gets shot by Boba when they have their duel after their Tatooine training arc that was supposed to be part of Clone Wars, and Boba gets his like iconic like dent in his helmet from that. And we see that in live action when at the end of Book of Boba Fett when he supposedly dies, right? So that story exists in some form or another. Does it exist already, or is it something that can be kind of tweaked a little bit? I mean, I definitely wouldn't mind it being tweaked, but then I need to see it like in like a Tales of something arc, right? I don't think it can just be dropped as its own like movie in the same way a Dark Disciple can, right? It has to be part of some other anthology-esque show, right?
Yeah, there's a Tales of the Bounty Hunters. We could do that show.
We could do
Like
that.
that was a short story book in the 90s. Might
Yeah,
as well. We do Tales from the Bounty Hunters, Tales of from Jabba's Palace again, Tales from Mos Eisley Cantina, Tales from New Republic, Tales. Let's do them all. That would be fun. I mean, why not, right? But it does take 2 years to get 6 episodes of a Tales of the Jedi, so it's not too surprising that we haven't done that.
yeah.
Where else were we? Travis says,
The Last
okay,
Jedi
yeah,
nods.
I did love the Last Jedi nods in this episode with the good guys, bad guys line, and of course the sunset shot. Yeah, there were some interesting interesting lines added here. That is the best line from DJ, by the way.
Yeah.
Uh, when he turns them over in the Last Jedi, that's by far my favorite DJ part. I still don't love the character, but that's by far my favorite DJ thing.
Yeah, I wish Benicio del Toro actually was someone that became that person as opposed to just being a walking message, right? Because I think you're just wasting his acting.
Yeah, definitely. He should have been a dark side character. That would have been awesome.
Dark Jedi.
Yep. When Ventress kisses Colt, I remember they showed a lot of that, and then it would be edited out in reruns. Yeah, it would. And then it's still in the final cut though. If you watch on Disney Plus, it's still there.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was there's some uproar over that one.
That one I think was only for Cartoon Network reruns, like after their first one, and now Disney's like, well, I think we've moved past that point.
Yeah. One big issue with some Clone Wars episodes was clones dying only to be forgotten about instantly, like Echo and Gregor. Yeah, I think in a way to give a lot of characters more life, they gave a lot of characters names and stories and then wouldn't come back to them. But the Clone Wars, the end of the Clone Wars was so troubled, and not necessarily by any studio interference or anything, but just by the transition of Lucasfilm to Disney. uh, the idea of it being up in the air, what was going to happen, what wasn't. Then you had the Netflix acquisition for season 6, and all those things. That I think there were ideas there because there are ideas for the show to pretty much go forever. Like they didn't really have an end set up, and then it got canceled. So
Yeah.
they might have followed up. Obviously, they followed up with Echo, and then Gregor. They probably were planning on following up at some point.
Yeah, I mean, it makes me a little sad because the Kashyyyk arc kind of just got condensed into, just a Gunji sort of episode that doesn't really have too much stakes either.
Hmm.
And the armor that Echo was wearing was like a mix of his 501st ARC Trooper vibes with, just more red and a little bit more teched out, right? Like I think he was also using another arm. Like we've seen all these different like toys that have him use like this extra arm that he wants whenever he needs to, but he just has never used it in the show.
Hmm.
So that bummed me a little bit out there. But I guess like to explain that a little bit. I mean, you're in a war, right? Your brothers are dying constantly, right? And in a way, there has to be some level of repression of like seeing yourself in the mirror and knowing that face has died over and over and over again, and you just still have to keep fighting, right? And yeah, people like those in the 501st and the 212 were probably a little bit better adjusted because of their generals compared to some of the more dogmatic, more just aloof Jedi of the era. But they didn't have time to think about it because if you're thinking while you're fighting, you're not really fighting. You're stuck. You're not reacting to what's being demanded out of you, and your training has to kick in. And yeah, we didn't see too many moments either of them just like lounging about after a fight or before a fight, right? It was always during a battle too. So that always limited how much they could react to it. But I also just don't think Lucas cared too much at that point. I think this is where the Bad Batch has really taken that next step. Like, how do we further make these clones more humanized? And this is a great way to like have them be in such limited quantities, be fighting for every little thing now. When they do get lost, even if they've only been introduced with a name or a cool armor design, you feel it a little bit more.
Yeah. Well, we're going to start to wrap it up here pretty soon. But I did want to get to one thing Travis says here down in the chat because it is an interesting idea. He said that I think Hemlock would be after Boba anyway, given his unaltered DNA. I wouldn't mind if Boba was one of the imprisoned clones on Tantus, the Bad Batch offering him to join when they obviously inevitably tried to assault Tantus, but he just runs off. Last time we saw Boba and Ventress bested and humiliated him on the job, so I could see him showing up just to get even. Yeah, that's an interesting idea that they already have him captured. I didn't think of that. It's a possibility. I just feel like at this point, I feel like we underestimate how established Boba is, right? Like he's already starting to build his career. In a way, this show is a good at minimum 2 years since we've seen Boba, 3, 4 years possibly since we've seen Boba. He's already a teenager, right? Mid to late teenager. He kind of an established bounty hunter at this point, taking on the Fett name too. He's got allies. He's got a lot of things. Like I just feel like his story deviates in a completely different direction than the Empire, and obviously, being somebody who's so willing to work with them, well versed in the way they operate. I don't know if I see him coming into the fold in this story. I just feel like the clone thing, he doesn't consider himself a clone. He considers himself his dad. Like he's his
Yeah.
dad's son. That's like his identity. So I just think it would be a little weird to bring him into the show no matter what. I think that idea is one of the more interesting ones I've heard though about Boba so far. But I think again, if you did that, like I'd really want to see Boba's just not a character I want to see name dropped. Like if you did that, I really want to see how that plays on his psyche, how it plays with him to be surrounded by clones, to be involved with a bunch of clones that he has to basically say they all look exactly like me, but I've got such a big pride and ego that I'm better than all of them. How does he treat that situation? How does he treat them? Why does he not get involved in their conflict? It's a lot of stuff that you would have to do to develop Boba, and I feel like not putting him in the show is the best way not to open up a bunch of can of worms that you can't explain in one episode or two episodes.
Yeah, again, if you make Boba really important in this show, then you need to have him important for 3 to 4 episodes. Like he needs to have his own proper arc, and if you're hiding the fact that your Ventress is not the only surprise at the end of this season, but it's him and Ventress, I think, and maybe Quinlan too, then I think like people would be like online being like, oh my God, we have to watch it just to see like what it sets in stage for uh, Boba, what Ventress really is, and what the hell Quinlan is also doing, right? Like with the Path or something, right? Like this could be a season they've kind of really talked about in interviews and everything. That, like Jennifer Corbett and everyone, like this is like the connective tissue to all different eras of Star Wars. So maybe there is a possibility, but you have to almost make them part of the Bad Batch crew or tagging along for a large chunk of it to make that work. So in my mind, if that were the case, and I think that is a pretty interesting idea to have him be captured, if we're trying to like fan fiction it out a little bit, uh, last time we saw him was when with Dark Disciple when he was hired by Ventress after the whole train episode where she refused to let Boba, let get that girl like wedded off as like a slave bride and everything. And even though he had some morals, but he's like, what are we doing? Like he was still trying to do the job. All right. Then Dark Disciple happens. She's got them to help rescue Quinlan and all that, but it doesn't work out. If we do have Krait's Claw appear again, that's the Tatooine Syndicate with his droid and Bosk and everyone else, right? It'd be very interesting to see if they maybe bring in 1313 elements where his crew eventually turns on him and tries to kill him off, right? So maybe they sell him out, right? Once they hear about like M counts or something like that, or hear about Omega specifically, they're like, well, we know Boa's a clone, right? Like we know that he's Jango's son and all that. Maybe they sell him off, and then that's why he's there at Tantus. And I think that would be pretty interesting to see if, like, if they use his blood or something for, to combine with whatever they have remaining from Omega. But why he would like not be hunted down by the Empire, like you bring up there, Travis. I think and why he like works with them. It'd be pretty interesting if we've seen Boba throughout canon and legends, from A New Hope onwards till the Return of the Jedi. He doesn't take off his helmet, right? So maybe he like it manages to like completely erase his identity and any traces of Kamino and all that, and he stays like with the helmet on for the next like 15, 20 years until Book of Boba Fett, where he starts taking it off, and the Mandalorian right after his whole Sarlacc experience. So maybe nobody truly knows him other than like obviously Vader because he's got the Force. He can recognize this kid, and it reminds him of like Rex and Cody and all these guys. So maybe he like that's a way of doing it. But it gets too convoluted, it gets too detailed, and that's something I'd want to be explored a little bit more in a mature medium like a video game, anyways, or like a book, just because I want to see Boba fully grow into that armor, fully grow into that lone
Yeah,
wolf, do it for the money, cold, ruthless killer. He's not there yet. Where we leave him in the end of Clone Wars, he's still got morals. He's still, and that's what some of the thing that's holding him back. He hasn't figured out how to combine it with his, father's code of honor and everything, and still do the jobs that he wants to do. And how does that then, come up as like trauma for him that it's only slightly hinted at with flashbacks and visions during his back to tank sessions in the Book of Boba Fett. So that's a long-winded way of saying that I like the idea. I just don't think it's got enough time for this show unless they're making them the leads. Uh, but then, if they do end up going into it, make it for a video game or something. Like if they make
yeah,
1313 somehow happen, I think every Star Wars fan, even people who are like swearing off of Disney and all that, right? They'd be like, okay, I'm a little tempted to see what's going to go on with like young Boba when he becomes like the ruthless
absolutely.
guy behind the mask.
Yeah, absolutely. Origin story, Boba Fett video game. I mean, it would work perfect for today's world when we're wanting story-based open world games. People really want that. Well, why not? You could have him get so many weapon upgrades, so many different cool gadgets. It would be so
Yeah.
he's perfect. He's perfect for it. There was a reason they wanted to do it in the first place. Why it hasn't been done yet is honestly crazy.
Yeah.
He is the prototypical video game character. Quiet, doesn't say much, cool, has a lot of weapons. Why not? Has a cool ship. There's so many things you can do with Boba um, in a gaming format, and it's just outrageous they haven't done it yet. Because even just the little dated glimpses we got of it in Bounty Hunter with Django, right? That was awesome. Playing as Django, playing with the jetpack, and that is a very dated game with some very mediocre combat. So enhance it for Boba, might as well. Why not? Well, I think that should wrap up our stream tonight. We actually ran it. That was a pretty good one, everybody, talking about this episode of the Bad Batch. Thank you so much for joining us, Travis and Colton, everybody else who joined us along the way. We always appreciate you joining and talking about the Bad Batch every week. We'll be back next Wednesday for the Bad Batch Season 3, Episode 9. The Harbinger is what it's called. So we'll be looking forward to that. Hopefully it's another good episode and a pretty exciting one with whoever is revealed to be talking to Fennec at the end of this one. If you didn't check out yesterday's live, we did a live for almost an hour and 30 minutes, I believe, talking about the Acolyte and a lot of the latest news in Star Wars that we haven't covered. Patty Jenkins' return with Rogue Squadron, as well as the disaster that was Star Wars Battlefront, the Classic Collection, Mandalorian Season 4, and a bunch of other stuff. Check that out. And we also did a trailer reaction yesterday to the Acolyte episode. The Acolyte debut teaser trailer. We did a reaction to it. You can see our first time watching it on there if you are interested in that. And then obviously stay tuned for predictions, speculation. We'll have a book review out for the new High Republic young adult book, Defy the Storm, as well, sometime at the beginning of next week. So stay tuned for all of that great stuff. Thank you all so much for watching this